Outlaw Star had been on my rewatch list longer than any other anime because it was one of the first anime I ever watched, and on top of that, as soon as I found out that it was heavily censored for its release on Cartoon Network, I was really interested in watching it again someday. So why did it take me 20 years to finally get back to it? Well, that's kind of the nature of a single plus level show. I was recently asked about my rating system, and single plus just means good but not great. So it's not a high priority for rewatch, although if a good opportunity comes along, I'll give it a shot. And I thought I had a really good opportunity on Sunrise's YouTube channel. Now, how did I even discover Sunrise's YouTube channel? Well, this all started last year. I was walking around Akihabara when, out of nowhere, I saw Scryed goods for sale. And that kind of surprised me because I had never seen Scryed goods for sale in Akihabara before, or at least not in a prominent place. Maybe I'd caught a figure or two in like the bottom basement back shelf of a used figure store, but never just right up front. So I walk up to this desk and I'm wondering, what's this all about? Turns out it's Scryed's 20th anniversary. So they're doing this whole promotion, and naturally I didn't buy anything because I'm cheap, but I went back home and dug into it. Apparently, as part of the promotion, they were uploading full episodes to Sunrise's YouTube channel. So I'm thinking to myself, I've already seen Scryed twice. There's no real need to see it again. But one thought did occur to me. I have seen Scryed English dubbed and English subbed. If I watched it raw in Japanese, that would be the first time I'd ever seen an anime in all three formats. So I was interested in doing that, and I decided to start watching episodes on Sunrise's YouTube channel. Now let me show you what the Sunrise YouTube channel actually looks like, because I'm pretty sure it's region restricted for at least the full episodes outside of Japan. Here we are on Sunrise's YouTube channel. As you can see, there are some full episodes up of mostly older mecha anime that I've never heard of. And I don't mean to make fun of them for that, because I have been on the receiving end of this and I don't like it. Last year when I was watching Scryed, my wife walked into the room and she was like, "Hey, what's this retro anime you're watching?" And I was like, "Are you kidding me? This is Scryed. This is no retro anime. It's only 20 years old." And at that point I realized that 20 years old qualifies you as being retro. But like I said, I'm not trying to throw stones here. I've just never heard of most of these, and I wouldn't know what to call them in English. You got Blue Comet SPT Lasner, Heavy Battlesuit Elgime, Zegapane. I have heard of that one. Gold Hero, like Golden Hero Gold Run, Hot Blooded Super Strong Gaozara. I mean, I just don't know any of these. And they do have something of an audience. They have like 20, 30K, 15K views each. But like I said, mostly older anime that people haven't really heard of or might not give much attention. They do have promotional videos on the channel that are like a minute or less long. I was able to access these videos when I was in India over the summer, but I couldn't see any of the full-length videos, so I assumed that those at least were region restricted. As you can see, Outlaw Star Episode 1 is still up, but none of the other episodes are. Scryed is not up at all, and let me tell you why that's the case. Here was Scryed's upload schedule. They'd upload one episode a week, and they'd leave each episode up for 2 weeks. So what would end up happening was 2 episodes would be up on the YouTube channel at any given time. For example, during week 5, episode 5 would go up, episode 3 would come down, and episodes 4 and 5 would be up together. Then the next week, week 6, episode 6 would go up, episode 4 would come down, and episodes 5 and 6 would be up together. And this trend continued on until week 14, when episode 14 did not go up, but episode 12 came down. And I'm thinking to myself, oh shit, are they actually going to cancel this one halfway through? And sure enough, next week comes along, episode 15 does not go up, but episode 13 comes down. There is no more Scryed on the YouTube channel. Sunrise screwed me over. Alright, so fool me once, shame on you. I know never to trust Sunrise again. And then earlier this year, against my better judgment, I see them uploading episodes of Outlaw Star. It occurred to me, hey, I've always wanted to rewatch Outlaw Star. Why don't I give Sunrise one more chance? Surely they wouldn't do the same thing again, would they? Episode 14 never goes up. Episode 12 comes down. They did it to me again. So Sunrise left me no choice but to find alternative means of watching the rest. I hadn't watched Outlaw Star in 20 years, so of course I don't remember it scene for scene, but from the very first episode, there were scenes that I'm sure didn't make it onto Cartoon Network. Gene Starwind clearly gets around, and his behavior is a lot more sexually charged than I recall from 20 years ago. I remember reading that Fred's flamboyance and ambiguous pedophilia were toned down for Cartoon Network, but he was actually about as gay and pedophilic as I'd remembered. Either my initial observations were spot on, or I've just gotten so used to gay stuff and pedophilia in anime that I've been completely desensitized to it. Episode 23, the Hot Springs episode that was completely cut from Cartoon Network back in 2001. I read that it did finally air on Cartoon Network in 2018, and I'm really curious as to what was cut out and what was left in. In any case, I was looking forward to this episode more than anything else. But it was mildly disappointing, mainly because the sense of humor was really dumb. The fan service itself was pretty good. I'm sure I would have been much more impressed back when I was 16, but better late than never. What really surprised me about episode 23 was that a part of this episode was extremely important to the ending of the series, so you can't skip this episode if you really want to understand Gene's final fights. Since Outlaw Star was one of the first anime I ever watched, back then everything seemed really new, but I was afraid that in retrospect, since 20 years have passed and I've seen a lot of anime in the meantime, looking back everything might seem really generic. But I was kind of surprised that at least two things about it, at least in an aesthetic sense, still strike me as kind of unique. First would be the Asian space aesthetic. Usually when Japan is trying to convey a sense that something is high-tech or futuristic, you'll see everything done in a Western style, such as alphabetic lettering and Western architecture, whereas Japanese or Asian stuff is mostly seen as traditional. This is not the case in Outlaw Star, with its pirates using Tao magic, there's Japanese writing all over the place, and Outlaw Star's concept of space colonization apparently means there's nothing but Chinese restaurants in space wherever you go. The other aesthetic choice I found surprisingly unique was the rocket-style spaceships. In many anime, and sci-fi more broadly, such as in Star Wars, spaceships are just kind of juiced-up airplanes. They take off just like an airplane and keep going until they're in space. The spaceships on Outlaw Star, on the other hand, generate a lot of thrust, they take off using Cape Canaveral-style launch towers, and they dock in space in ways that you might actually see from realistic spacecraft. Which is kind of funny because the grappler ship concept is completely unrealistic. Now let's get to the plot. What really surprised me in this show was that the first half was actually more plot heavy than the second half, which is kind of surprising for a 26 episode action-adventure anime, which tend to get more serious in the second half and get their lighthearted stuff out of the way a bit earlier. So I took a look back at the episodes and filtered out which ones I would consider to be sort of one-shot adventure stories that didn't have much of an impact on the overall plot, or simply lighthearted episodes. And I found those to be episode 9, which is already a third of the way through, then halfway through at episode 13, after that, episodes 16, 18, 19, and of course 23, the Hot Springs episode. And I actually do like the placement of this really lighthearted Hot Springs episode right before the 3-episode climax, but episodes 16 through 19 felt really slow with the exception of episode 17, which I would actually say was one of the best in the whole show. Now let's talk about the climax really quick, and spoilers here, but I thought a lot of the fights were really quick and or boring, especially Gene's. His fights basically consisted of him pulling out a magic bullet, shooting it, and then if it worked, great. If it didn't, pull out another magic bullet and try that one instead. Now that's not to say that the ending as a whole was bad. I think the ending was overall pretty good, but the fights at least were underwhelming. Now let's rank some of the characters. I noticed that Gene had some of those hot-headed, one-track mind, shonen protagonist vibes. I didn't mind it all the first time I watched it, but now having seen tons of those characters, sometimes it got annoying. When those traits weren't front and center, Gene was a perfectly good main character. Jim is exactly as I remembered him, the kid's sidekick. Likeable, but nothing special. The McDougal brothers were kind of disappointing this time around. Last time I watched it, I remember them being really menacing, but this time they didn't feel all that tough. In contrast, the pirates felt like the much tougher enemies. Now let's get on to the best girl ranking. At number 1, I have none other than Hot Ice Hilda. I'm not going to talk about the spoilers. If you're interested, just go watch it. At number 2, I have Twilight Suzuka, who I thought was severely underused. Once she joined the crew, there wasn't another Suzuka-centric episode. Most of the time, she was just sitting in the back, sipping tea. At number 3, I have Aisha Clan. If she'd gotten any more screen time, she may have become annoying. but I think they balanced her out well enough that she became a serviceable comic relief character. And finally, at number 4, Melfina. The main girl, also the robot with feelings. And you know how I feel about those. Got nothing against her, she just felt like more of a plot device than a character. So if you take a look at the character ranking one more time, you'll notice that the more screen time a woman got, the less I liked her. And that probably says a little bit about me. Since I watched Outlaw Star in raw Japanese this time, without even any Japanese subtitles to help me, I want to talk about the Japanese difficulty level. Overall, I would say it's average with some difficult sci-fi terms thrown in. Now, I was afraid things would get more difficult in the final 3 episodes when they got to the galactic ley line because I thought maybe they would use more old-fashioned language or more philosophical language, but it only got a little more difficult. It really wasn't that bad. By far, the most difficult parts of this show in Japanese were those 1-minute intro segments to each episode in which they use a lot of poetic or literary language. I was able to get the gist of what they were saying, but I definitely couldn't translate it word for word. Now, sound quality may have played a role here. There were often times when I thought the sound felt a bit fuzzy or unclear or unbalanced, and I wish I could describe it in more concrete terms than that, but I know nothing about animation quality in the first place, let alone audio quality, so whatever goes into it, I have no idea. I just have to assume that since this show first aired back in 1998, that there have been massive advancements in sound quality and sound technology, just as there have been in animation quality and technology. So, of course, stuff that comes out today is going to sound a lot more crisp than the stuff that came out back then. And that's especially true when you don't have subtitles to sort of take your attention away from any minor issues with the sound. Alright, so final grade, single plus. Same grade I gave it back then. So I would say that Outlaw Star, thankfully, does hold up.